Very cool. We got an email in from Linda. Hi there. Thank you for continuing Dr. Joe's legacy of helping people out with his medical and godly wisdom. I have questions concerning MS, diagnosed in 2008. I'm 65 years old, limited mobility. I would like info on the best supplements, diets, exercises, etc. Wow, that's a lot. Sincerely, Linda. Thank you, Linda. So she wants to make some changes. What are we going to do? What are some suggestions?
Sure. So I'll just start with a brief overview of MS. So MS encompasses the autoimmune disease of the central nervous system. It's characterized by chronic inflammation, demyelination, gliosis, and neural loss.
Those are all big words.
Yes. And so it's the damage to this myelin, or it's basically the insulation of the neurons within your brain that are damaged, and then this disrupts those normal signals that are going to and from, the brain and to different parts of the body.
Okay, so the insulation, so like on a wire, literally, a copper wire has a plastic, it's plastic sheath around it. The myelin is that plastic sheath keeping the signal where it needs to be.
Yep.
And MS is damaging that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So over time, it's where you can get weakness because you're just not conducting those signals from your brain to the areas of the body. Some people lose their ability to move and to function over time. Also, though, because you think about your nerves, it also conducts the opposite way, conducts pain from peripheral to central. So it goes both ways. So that's inside your own body. It's an autoimmune. Your body's attacking. Any contact, with that nerve can then cause pain. So there can be a lot of, nerve type pains like shocking sensations, et cetera, that can occur. But it really comes down to even just movements of the neck. Really comes down to, the loss of that myelin sheath.
Okay.
Wow. So and it just seems. Like a lot of autoimmune diseases, there, are links to genetics for sure, but also exposures, different exposures to different viruses or bacteria, along with that, your sex, 2 to 3 times more likely if you're female, age, 20 to 40 years old at onset. Also, and, my mind kind of jumps to, does this, link it to vitamin D potentially, but, temperate areas and higher latitudes. They've definitely, this is from the Mayo Clinic, they definitely found that northern US, Canada, Australia, those farther away from the equator, north and south, are more likely to have higher MS rates too.
Interesting.
So, I mean, again, is that 100%, vitamin D's, that's how I'm going to prevent that. But it does, again, show you the links, especially this has been kind of a vitamin D themed show.
Yeah.
That it does, again, put this more kind of fuel to that fire about what, vitamin D's potential link with especially with autoimmune conditions and its ability to modulate. So
got it.
It's a very debilitating disease for sure.
Wow.
Also a link to obesity. And I think this is where, so many of these diseases, yes, there's a genetic component and that's the overriding one, but its expression, its severity, when it comes on, if it comes on, but childhood and adolescent obesity have been linked.
Really?
And what we know about adipose tissue, fat tissue, it's not inert. It's not just sitting there. It releases inflammatory leukotrienes and tumor necrosis factor alpha, which is a very powerful inflammatory that's actually blocked in medications that are used for MS and are used for autoimmune conditions. Biologic drugs block tumor necrosis factor alpha. And we know that fat can release some of that. So over time, if again, the likelihood, there's a link between obesity, that your own body is producing a lot of inflammation beyond potentially, what goes awry, centrally, in the process. So again, genetics, then linked to climate, sex, and potential, obesity as well. That's, I think, pretty incredible to kind of put all that together.
Wow. Okay. So she has limited mobility.
Yeah.
But wants to try to diet, exercise, and supplement. That's a lot to bite off. What can we do to help her there?
Supplement wise, again, given at the stage that she's in, I don't want to again, keep tooting the horn of vitamin D, but I think that's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
And just allow her immune system to hopefully function in the best modulatory capacity that it can, to prevent further damage potentially. Again, inexpensive supplement, no downside, unless you start getting mega levels, which we're not going to recommend. Get a level done, take an amount that's commensurate to that level and do that, I think, first and foremost.
Okay.
There are definitely links to neuron health and B12. But that becomes a little tough because it's mainly linked to if you have a deficiency of B12, that in and of itself, has caused the demyelination that's similar, but it's just done in a different pathway. Okay. So we know that vitamin B12 is involved from that standpoint in myelin sheath health, but it's in a different mechanism than what the damage that's being done by the multiple sclerosis disease process is doing. So it's a little bit different.
Counteractive.
However, then what I did find that was interesting to kind of loop me back to it is that homocysteine is basically an inflammatory marker in the body. Okay. It's shown linked to cardiovascular disease, different, inflammation pathways. It's elevated in relapsing remitting MS. A lot of times what that means is in MS, what you see in a lot of cases is relapsing basically means you go into a period where there's a lot of pain, a lot of lack of ambulation, et cetera. You've got all the symptoms are really hitting you hard. Yeah. And then you've got a remission period where you feel a little better. That can happen naturally. That happens with meds, steroids, other biologic drugs that are used. But they found, and is it chicken or the egg? Is it because you've got so much going on in your body? That's why you're an inflammatory marker like homocysteine goes up? Maybe. So B12 and folate, we know for sure lower homocysteine. Okay. So I think from that angle, B12 and folate could be a good thing to do, and vitamin D. But again, life-changing things with it. I wish I had more, but I think those are two basic supplements that have other benefits, especially, bone health. If she is not ambulatory, having trouble getting around, her bones are going to start to, it's a feedback mechanism. Yeah. Your bones are potentially going to start to weaken a little bit. Vitamin D can help with that too. So I think there's multiple different angles there.
Okay. What can we do in terms of movement? If she's not moving a lot right now, how can we help her there?
Depending on what exactly her level of activity is, you ideally kind of we would just meet her exactly where she's at. I don't know if she's already working with a, physical therapist or occupational therapist, but finding the right entry point is most important. And then progressing, progressing where appropriate. So no matter if you are, if you find yourself wheelchair bound, or you have a form that you still, can walk, run, perform different strength movements, there's definitely options. So the more ambulatory that you are, the more, the more comfortable that you are with those sorts of things. The same recommendations are there, trying to hit enough aerobic exercise, whether that's walking or, you have a stationary bike, flexibility exercises of the upper and lower extremities. Her provider may have already given her a, spirometer or something to breathe into that keeps the capacity of the lungs, up to snuff. There's arm cycling. There's most of these, devices and such are found in, physical therapy offices and all of that.
Sure.
But trying to actively participate in all of those as frequent as possible, are ultimately only going to help. And in the same way that you would progress a power lifter over time, your progression might look different, living with MS, but the goal is to progress in whatever capacity that you're, capable of.
So you're saying start where you're at and don't stop doing that, and then try to do more, whatever that looks like. It makes sense to me. Okay. All right. Anything diet-wise that she needs to be cognizant of? Avoid ultra-processed foods.
Yeah. And I think, at core level, Dante probably has more specifics, but inflammatory foods, processed foods, heavy amounts of red meat, in excess. I think when, you're looking at high sugar foods, those types of things, pretty obvious bad foods. The reason, again, not just for your weight, et cetera, it's really about the inflammatory. The last thing you need, you've got your body having, overactive immunity. Now you're going to kind of fuel that. I think is just something that is obvious to me to avoid. And I think also just general eating healthy is only going to help because you're fighting an uphill battle. Obviously, if you're having trouble getting around, you're in pain. I think anything that you're doing to help make sure that at least from a nutrient status, macro and micro, I think is key.
Okay, that makes sense. So you've got a fire and you want to stop feeding it fuel, avoid the inflammatory foods.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense.
There is an inflammatory food index.
Yeah.
The clinical utility of that, I'm not comfortable enough to say to tell her how to use that per se.
Oh, okay.
But I know that it's out there, and it might, if she was curious,
it's
basically.
a resource to look into.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.